Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going to be looking at skydiving.
Oh, cool.
And,
Sounds fun.
it is fun, but
Yeah.
we're not really focusing on like the jumping out of the plane part.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking more at the physics of what happens when you open a parachute.
All right. I'm intrigued.
So this is based on a blog post
Yeah.
and some really cool simulation files from
Mhm.
Evergreen Sektan Kim Kia
Mm-hmm.
at Open Educational Resources, Open Source Physics at Singapore.
Okay.
And they actually discovered something really interesting,
Yeah.
which is that a slower parachute opening might be safer.
Yeah. That's pretty counterintuitive.
Yeah, so let's dive into this a little bit. So how
Okay.
did they study this?
Well, they use these physics models
Okay.
to simulate a parachute opening.
Okay.
And they're called Model A and Model B.
All right, creative names.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
So both of these models, they calculate forces using things like the skydiver's mass,
Right.
air density, and drag.
Okay.
The main difference, though, is that Model A
Mm-hmm.
simulates the parachute opening gradually over a period of time,
Oh, okay.
whereas Model B simulates an instant opening.
So Model A is kind of like easing on the brakes,
Yeah, I like that.
and Model B is slamming them.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So did they find out, like...
Yeah, so when you look at the results, you can really see why that gradual braking is super important.
Okay.
So Model A, that gradual opening, it results in a deceleration of about 3.1 G,
Right.
which is a pretty safe level for a skydiver.
Okay.
But Model B, with its, sudden stop,
Right.
produces a 17 G deceleration,
Wow.
which is huge.
Yeah, 17G.
Yeah, and that kind of force can easily cause an injury.
Yeah, you'd think a fast opening would be preferable.
Right, you would think so.
Right.
It seems intuitive, but
But the physics,
yeah, the physics tells us otherwise.
yeah,
It's really interesting.
shows otherwise. So are we saying that like real world parachutes actually open slowly then?
Well, if you think about, videos and movies,
Mm-hmm.
parachutes don't just
They don't.
magically poof open.
No.
They take a few seconds to inflate.
Right.
And actually, the blog post mentions a Discovery Channel video that shows this in real-world parachute behavior.
Okay.
So it takes time for that parachute to catch the air,
Right.
create enough drag to slow the skydiver down safely.
Yeah, safely, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So it's not just a theory.
No.
These models actually reflect
Reflect reality.
what happens.
Yeah.
It's cool, right?
Yeah, and this is making me think about all those like skydiving scenes in like action movies and stuff where it just kind of like pops open.
Yeah, they make it seem so instant.
Yeah.
And that's a good point because
Yeah.
it highlights this interesting point that the author brought up,
Okay.
which is that they encountered a physics exam question.
Where the correct answer actually favored the instant opening scenario.
Wow.
The one with those crazy G forces.
So even educational materials.
Sometimes,
That's wrong.
yeah, sometimes they oversimplify it.
Wow. That's concerning.
Yeah, it really makes you
What?
question what you think you know.
Yeah, if I were a physics student, I'd be like,
I do, man.
wait a minute.
Right, exactly. It just underscores the importance of looking beyond
Right.
the simple answers
Yeah.
and really understanding what's going on.
The principles.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that a slower opening is safer.
Right.
But how do skydivers actually make sure
Yeah, how do
that happens?
what's going on in those
Yeah, what are the mechanisms?
crucial seconds when the parachute's opening?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to the next level of detail in our deep dive today,
Okay.
which is the real-world mechanisms that control parachute opening.
It's
Because it's not just about physics.
also about clever engineering
Okay.
and skilled technique.
Okay, I'm all ears.
All right, let's get into it.
Let's hear it. Okay, so we've talked about the physics models and why like a slower parachute opening is safer.
Right.
But how do skydivers actually make sure that
Yeah.
they don't experience those crazy high G-forces?
Yeah, how do they manage that?
When they pull the cord.
Well,
Yeah.
you've probably seen skydivers, pulling this small cord
Mm-hmm.
to initiate the parachute opening.
Right.
But that cord doesn't deploy the full parachute immediately.
Oh.
It actually releases a smaller parachute
Okay.
called a pilot chute.
So it's like a mini parachute that
Exactly.
comes out first.
Yeah, it's
So what's the point of that?
It's all about creating this controlled drag.
Okay.
So the pilot chute catches the air and starts to slow the skydiver's descent.
Okay.
And it just creates stability and sets up a much smoother deployment for the main parachute.
So it's like a buffer then.
Yeah. I like that.
Easing the transition from free fall to a controlled descent.
Exactly,
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
And then once the pilot chute has done its job,
Uh-huh.
it pulls out the main parachute from its container.
Okay.
But even then, the main parachute doesn't just instantly inflate.
So there's even more control
Yeah.
built into the main parachute opening.
There is, yeah.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So modern parachutes have all these clever design features.
Mm-hmm.
They have things called slider systems and suspension lines
Okay.
that all work together to ensure a gradual
Yeah.
and controlled opening.
Can you break that down for me?
Yeah, sure.
Like, what do those systems actually do?
So imagine you have this fabric panel called a slider,
Okay.
and it sits on top of the packed parachute.
Okay.
And as the parachute comes out,
Mm-hmm.
the slider slowly moves down the suspension lines.
Okay.
And what that does is it temporarily reduces the parachute's surface area.
So it's like partially blocking it?
Yeah, exactly.
F-
It's preventing it from catching the full force of the air
Okay.
all at once.
So it's allowing it to kind of like fill with air more gradually?
Precisely.
Okay.
And so this gradual inflation is what helps create that smooth deceleration curve
Okay.
that we saw in the physics models.
Makes sense. It's all about avoiding that sudden
Right.
spike.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing how much engineering
I know, right?
goes into something that seems so simple.
It really is.
Yeah, and it's not just the equipment you're telling me.
No, skydivers themselves actually play a role
What do they do?
in managing the parachute opening.
Really?
Yeah, so experienced skydivers can actually use their body position
Oh, wow.
and movements
Okay.
to influence the parachute opening.
Wow, so they're like fine-tuning it?
Yeah, they can adjust their body to affect drag and stability.
So it's a combination of like the physics.
Yeah,
it's like all coming
It's
together.
all coming together.
And their skill.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, this whole discussion about parachute openings is making me think back to something you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
You said that even some physics experts disagree
Right.
on how to model this process.
You have a good memory.
Well, I tried.
Yeah, you're right. There is this kind of debate
That's fascinating.
within the physics community.
You mean like,
Yeah.
even when it comes to something as seemingly straightforward
It seems straightforward.
as a parachute opening, there's room for debate.
More than you might think.
Okay, I am hooked.
All right, good.
What are the different sides of this debate?
Yeah, what are they arguing about?
Yeah, what are the physicists arguing about? Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about the crazy physics of skydiving, and now we're diving even deeper into a debate among the physics experts themselves.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. And it really comes down to this.
Yeah.
How much can you simplify something before it's, like, too simple?
Especially when you're talking about modeling a real-world event,
Yes.
like a parachute opening.
So you have some physicists who are all about keeping things simple, especially for teaching,
Right, especially if you're just learning the basics.
But then others are like, hold on, those simplifications?
Yeah.
Those can lead to some big misconceptions.
So on one side, you have the folks who are like, start simple.
Right. Don't overwhelm the students.
And then the other side's like, but if it's too simple, it's not accurate.
Exactly. Like, they argue that oversimplification
Mm-hmm.
can lead to people misunderstanding things.
Yeah.
And that can even be dangerous, especially with something like skydiving.
Right, right.
They're like, no, we need more realistic models, even if they're, like, more complicated mathematically.
So it's like a trade-off then.
Yeah.
Like, how do you balance clarity with accuracy?
It's a tough one, for sure. Like, how do you capture the essence of the physics without getting bogged down?
Right? Without overwhelming people.
And like a lot of things in science, there's no easy answer.
It's an ongoing conversation, right?
Totally.
Like, how do we best teach this stuff?
And represent the real world in our models. It's complicated.
Well, this makes me think about those models we were looking at before,
Yeah.
like Model A and Model B. Even Model A, where it's a gradual opening,
Uh-huh.
that's still a simplification, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like Model A assumes this perfectly consistent rate of deceleration as the parachute opens.
Okay.
But in the real world, it's way more dynamic. You've got shifts in air pressure and variations in the parachute's shape as it inflates.
Oh, wow. So many factors.
And then, of course, you've got the skydiver making adjustments, too.
Right.
It's like a constant interaction.
Like a dance.
Right.
So even what we've been calling a slow opening is still not the whole picture.
Exactly. And I think that's a good reminder that even when we think we understand something, there's always more to learn.
It's like science is always evolving.
All the time. Science isn't about getting to one answer and then stopping, It's about always refining our understanding, getting closer and closer to how things actually work.
Well, it seems like this debate in the physics community is a perfect example of that.
It really is. Like, it shows how important it is to keep questioning things
Yeah, even the things we think we know.
and to be open to new ideas.
Well, this deep dive has definitely opened my eyes when it comes to skydiving. I honestly thought it was just about being brave enough to jump out of a plane.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of bravery involved.
But there's so much more to it.
So much. The physics, the engineering.
It's a whole world of science and engineering behind a safe landing.
I kind of think of it as art, too, in a way.
Oh, I like that.
When you see those skilled skydivers controlling their parachutes so precisely, it's amazing.
It's beautiful to see. It reminds you that even these, like, extreme activities,
Yeah,
they all come down to the laws of physics.
they do.
Yeah.
And that curious people are constantly learning more about those laws.
And hopefully this deep dive has sparked some curiosity out there.
Yeah, maybe got some people thinking about the science behind everyday things.
So if you want to keep exploring, check out the show notes. We've got links to that blog post and the simulation files. Until next time, happy exploring. Deep dive.